The hum of the device against my palm was the only constant in my life, a rhythmic, buzzing static that had slowly become the soundtrack to my isolation. At 21, I had inadvertently mastered the art of building a fortress within my own bedroom, a sanctuary of silk sheets and dimmed LED lights where the rest of the world couldn't reach me. I would lie back, feeling the cool air from the vent tracing invisible patterns across my skin, and let that mechanical vibration anchor me to the present. It was more than just a routine. It was a desperate necessity, a way to quiet the restless, white-hot energy that had been humming beneath my surface since I moved back home after graduation. I would close my eyes and imagine a presence that was heavy, solid, and overwhelming, until the tension finally snapped and left me drifting in the quiet, hollow aftermath of my own making. It was my secret, my ritual, and for a long time, I convinced myself it was enough to satisfy the hunger I couldn't name. But then he arrived, and the flickering candle of my solitary nights was instantly swallowed by the wildfire he brought into our house. His name was Julian, and he was the personification of everything I didn't know I wanted. My mother had met him during a whirlwind business trip to Chicago, and within 6 months, he was hauling his entire life into our quiet suburban home in heavy oak crates. I remember the exact moment he walked through the front door. The air in the foyer seemed to displace, as if the house itself had to expand to accommodate him. He wasn't the soft-spoken, intellectual type my mother usually gravitated toward. Julian was a force of nature, broad-shouldered, with silver-streaked hair that gave him a rugged, leading man edge, and a jawline so sharp it looked like it had been carved from granite. He moved with a deliberate, predatory grace, entirely too aware of the space he occupied and the effect he had on people. I told myself I hated him instantly. I hated the way his deep laughter vibrated through the floorboards, the way his heavy boots sounded on the hardwood, and the way the kitchen always smelled like cedar and expensive espresso whenever he was around. But mostly, I hated how my body betrayed me every time he looked my way. It was a visceral, bone-deep reaction that turned my blood into liquid lead and made my breath hitch in my throat. The obsession started in the margins of the day. I found myself watching him through the gaps in the blinds, caught in a loop of guilt and fascination. I'd be heading to the kitchen for water and see him in the backyard, his shirt discarded in the oppressive midday heat as he worked on the overgrown garden. The sight of his back, the way the muscles shifted and corded under his tanned skin, the faint sheen of sweat reflecting the sun was enough to make my throat go dry. I would linger behind the curtains, my heart drumming a frantic rhythm against my ribs, feeling like a voyeur in my own home. That night, when I reached for my device, the fantasies had shifted. It was no longer a faceless shadow in my mind. It was Julian. I could almost feel the weight of his gaze, the roughness of his calloused hands, and the deep, resonant timbre of his voice murmuring things I had no business wanting to hear. The vibration felt different, sharper, more urgent, almost painful as I whispered his name into the silence of my pillow, a confession that felt like the ultimate sin. The breaking point arrived on a Tuesday, one of those sweltering August nights where the air is so thick, you can practically feel it against your skin. My mother was pulling a double shift at the hospital, leaving the house unnervingly quiet, save for the distant hum of the central air. I was in my usual state, the bedroom door cracked just a hair to catch a breeze, lost in the rhythmic, buzzing trance of my nightly ritual. I was far gone, my back arched and my breath coming in ragged, shallow hitches when the door creaked. I froze, my heart stopping dead in my chest. Julian was standing there, silhouetted by the dim, amber light of the hallway. Every instinct told me to cover myself, to scream, to lash out in shame. But as our eyes locked, the shame was instantly incinerated by a violent surge of adrenaline. He didn't look away. Instead, his gaze darkened, sweeping over me with a hunger that was raw and terrifyingly honest. His hand was clamped onto the doorframe, his knuckles white, his chest heaving as if he were fighting an invisible war within himself. The silence between us was heavy, a physical weight that made it impossible to breathe. He took a slow, calculated step into the room, his presence casting a long, intimidating shadow that seemed to swallow the walls. "Chelsea," he rasped, and the way he said my name low, guttural, and laced with a warning sent a shiver down my spine that had nothing to do with the cold air conditioning. He told me to tell him to leave, yet everything about him asked me to do the opposite. I said nothing. Silence became my answer, heavy and deliberate. The room felt charged, as if one wrong breath could shatter it. When he finally stepped closer, the space between us dissolved, and with it, the last trace of restraint I still pretended to have. He moved slowly, almost carefully, watching me as though weighing every consequence we both understood but refused to name. The scent of him, familiar, grounding, wrapped around me, and for the first time I felt how small choice could be when desire had already decided. "You've thought about this," he said quietly. I didn't deny it. I was tired of distance, tired of pretending solitude was enough. What I wanted was real, no matter how wrong it was supposed to be. When he finally touched me, it wasn't urgency that overwhelmed me, but surrender. I wasn't losing control, I was giving it away. The weeks that followed blurred into secrecy and calculated risk. We learned how to exist between moments, brief conversations when the house was empty, lingering glances when it wasn't, stolen seconds that felt heavier than hours. Every encounter carried the thrill of being unseen, balanced on the edge of discovery. He became my focus, my constant. Old habits faded quietly into irrelevance. Nothing compared to the way he drew me into his world, how completely he erased everything else. He made me confront parts of myself I'd never acknowledged, pushing boundaries I didn't know I had crossed. But guilt crept in all the same. At dinner, I would meet my mother's eyes and feel the weight of her trust press against my chest. He played his role flawlessly, attentive, gentle, convincing. Sometimes I caught him watching her, and jealousy flared before collapsing into shame. We were building something fragile on a foundation we both knew could not last. A single brush of his hand in the hallway was enough to undo every promise I made to myself. The cycle repeated: resolve, temptation, surrender. The illusion nearly shattered one afternoon when we misjudged time. The sound of the garage door cut through the house, sharp and sudden. Panic froze us. In seconds, we returned to our places, him distant, composed, me steadying my breath. When my mother walked in, she saw nothing but normality. She never suspected, but I did. That was the moment I understood how close we were to losing everything. Still, we didn't stop, not immediately. What bound us had grown deeper than attraction. It was obsession, rooted in silence and secrecy. I memorized him in fragments, habits, routines, looks exchanged across rooms. My life narrowed until our secret defined it. Eventually, reality won. The risk grew too large, the damage too real. One night, without drama or promises, we ended it. No confessions, no exposure, just distance carefully restored. Time did what fear could not. The hunger faded. The secrecy loosened its grip. I carried the memory, not as triumph or regret, but as a lesson etched deep. Desire can remake you, but it should never become your only identity. I moved forward, whole, quieter, and finally my own.